saying something to Georgia, and I say whatever the sentence is, and then I just stop because that was the whole story, and then she's like, "Oh, I thought there was more than that."
Nope.
Sometimes it's normally to do with school that I go like, "Oh, this happened, and this person did this," and then she's like, "Yeah," and then I'm like, "No, that's it.
That's it." And
school's not that exciting.
This is a snapshot of the rest of your life with me. It's like I took Pip out for a walk, and I came back, and she was like, "Was it all right?" And I was like, "She being my wife."
Yeah.
I said, "Oh, I thought I saw a frog." Oh, but it wasn't a frog. Oh, what was it? It was a pile of poo.
It'd be funnier even if it was just like, "Oh, I didn't check."
I don't know. I didn't look. The good thing about that anecdote was that I had a nice dream about a frog that night. I was just shepherding a frog through my parents' house, and it was quite nice.
It is good when you feel powerful when something that's happened that day then informs a dream.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, my brain did that.
But something else, another dream I had that same night was all of a sudden, this film that I've been doing the behind the scenes on was on set, and they just sprung it on me that I was going to have a speaking part in it.
Did you?
This is a dream.
Oh,
this is a dream. This did not happen. And I mean, if for any second you were thinking, oh, maybe this is true, let me tell you what happened. For some reason, I had to be northern.
Yeah.
And they didn't tell me how northern, so I just sort of had to gauge it. But my first, basically, my first word was just to say, cow, cow. And then I sort of had to have a bit of dialogue and back and forth. But yeah, so I just went all out, and then and then I had to like get a deck of cards out of a picnic basket. It was really strange.
Did you write it down for your next short film?
No.
You shut up.
Cow, cow.
It's a good opening, a strong opening line.
That came from the fact that I'd met this actress on the last day of filming, and like the film's set in New York, and so everybody's American in it, and she's really pretty, really sort of like nicely sort of made up and everything, and sort of in the scene she's all like, I do declare, or whatever. And then I was just sort of hanging about doing, behind the scenes stuff. And I was just like, I'm Jonathan. She was like, oh, hello, it's nice to meet you. And I was like, okay. But even more than that, she was then just like, I was raised on a farm and they put me in charge of the guinea fowl, but then they all died. And it's like, have you been written by Alan Bennett?
Yeah.
It was, yeah. So I had a dream that I was then in the film and was just going, cow! So weird. Right, leaving all this in.
Yeah,
here we
obviously.
go. Hello and welcome back to the O3C podcast, coming to you from O3C Games. My name is Jonathan Dunn, and I'm joined by my oldest friend, Chris Dow.
Muscle rub.
And we are going around the world in 80 games.
Around the world in 80 games.
Right, here we go. Announcements. I guess if we're sticking with the global jet-setting premise of this season of the show, this bit here is the equivalent of going through security. So please take out any liquids and electronics at this point. Down the liquids, use your electronics to follow us on our social media platforms at O3C Games on pretty much everything. Follow, like, share, subscribe, all of the above. And also, just before you throw your phone into one of those soulless grey trays to be zapped by X-rays or whatever happens, head to our website, o3c.games, use the Discord link to join our server and come join us there. And now that you're through security, get your passport out to present to us for checking, please. And by passport, I mean money. And by and by present to us, I mean generously donate to us via our support page on our website through PayPal or Patreon. And by us checking, I of course mean issuing our thoroughly heartfelt thanks. and then we can give a big old kiss stamp on the passport page of your face. That's about as far as I can stretch that concept, I think.
Yeah, that's really pushing the limits of that particular metaphor.
Yeah. Good Lord. Well, hello and welcome to a brand new stop on the O3C tour of the world, travelling around the world in 80 games, and our destination for this month, and our butt munch. And our destination for this month, the month of May, is Poland.
Poland.
The lesser of the Teletubby home planets.
Bad.
Yeah. Which brings the tally of countries I've travelled to in real life and on this show up to 2. So that's quite nice. I have actually been to Poland.
Well done.
Thanks. Poland is a country with a quite extraordinary video game development scene, and I cannot wait to dive into that properly later. But it feels like a lot of water has passed under the bridge in the last month. I've been absurdly busy with work and also travelling home to Denmark for some family time. So I feel like I've barely caught up with you at all, Chris. So I tell you what, do you want to give me your headlines of gaming activity from the past month?
Yeah, I mean, my headlines that I've chosen all are isolated to one evening's worth of play.
Oh, Jesus.
Because... Sorry, I'm losing my voice today.
Did you finally put a few dozen hours into Tears of the Kingdom or some other substantial game?
No, I mean...
With more than one level?
Friend of the show, Gene, came to stay for a weekend recently, and we spent a whole evening picking through a folder of PS1 disc images whilst drinking outrageously sweet home-mixed cocktails.
Oh, boy.
And I thought for a bit of fun, it would be nice to give a micro review of some of the best, because we played an awful lot in little half-hour chunks.
Lovely stuff.
So, PlayStation 1 classics, here we go. Incredible Crisis. This is a bizarre narrative minigame collection that is scored by, this isn't a joke, the Tokyo Ska Paradise Orchestra. And all of the games are themed around a Japanese salaryman forgetting his mother's birthday. The best way to think of it, if you ever played Feel the Magic on the DS when that first came out,
it's
similar in that it's got like a storyline, but it's just mini games.
Yeah.
And it's better than that because it doesn't ask you to burn a hole in your touchscreen or blow into the microphone.
Oh,
so,
God.
7 out of 10 for that one.
Incredible Crisis.
Yeah. Next up, Charlie's Excellent Adventure.
Oh,
a truly horrible looking and sounding flick screen adventure game that has design lifted straight from the ZX Spectrum, it feels like. Except on top of that, we've got digitized sprite graphics of this horrible egg man. As if it was from Donkey Kong Country, except disgusting.
Oh, no.
So, 1 out of 10. Awful.
Very
hated every moment of it. Something a bit more me. Screaming Mad George's Paranoiascape. An absolutely bananas, like properly off the wall, Japanese exclusive first-person pinball game that has you driving a weird pinball flipper turret through the pipes and channels of a human body, destroying demons.
Right, Charlie's,
and to a soundtrack that comes across as a less polished Rammstein.
Jesus Christ, what's it called?
It's called Screaming Mad George's Paranoiascape.
Right.
For description, it sounds like I'm making it up, but it is genuinely a real thing. And
by
it was
Screaming Mad George, the Japanese artist and film director.
Correct, yeah. Because back then, anyone could make a PlayStation 1 game.
Yeah.
11 out of 10. It's great.
Unbelievable.
After that, back on home soil, GTA London 1969, an oft-forgotten expansion pack to the original top-down GTA that is set in London in the swinging 60s. If you've ever played the original game, it's more of the same, but it's still quite a lot of fun once you get over the on-foot character having to be controlled like a car, because you have a distinct accelerate and reverse button, whether you're in a car or on foot. Yeah. So, decent fun. We played it for almost an hour, so we were quite enjoying it, but 6 out of 10. And then finally, a game just called Music, which is basically a simple drag-and-drop sequencer, a la EJ, that we used to use at school, that somehow works around the PlayStation 1's pretty paltry pool of RAM, and it allows you to make some serviceable club bangers from the comfort of your sofa.
Oh, fair play.
Did we produce gold at 2 a.m? No. Did our neighbours enjoy the fruits of our labour? Probably also no. But I had a nice time. 5 out of 10. and my headline review is that the PlayStation 1, it's just really cool. Never owned one back in the day.
Yeah,
and there
me
is
neither.
such a big library that, especially if you like strange, esoteric Japanese games, there are thousands to play.
Yeah.
Quite literally thousands.
It's a mad old time. I've just been seeing the Tomb Raider 1 to 3 remastered collection, which I assumed was going to be an absolute hot mess, but it's not. Speaking of games that also have tank controls, but then you remember that everything was on the D-pad, and it's like, how do we do this? This hasn't been done yet. And and a lot of stuff had to be tried and tested before we found just simply comfort.
Yeah, it's fascinating, like playing old games like this. How many first-person games in particular just do not have any semblance of order between releases.
Yeah.
So you'll have a game being like, well, the D-pad can go forwards and back, because that kind of makes sense. Left and right can turn. And then someone else would go, no, left and right should strafe, but turn should be L2 and R2. Every single controller is just putting in the hours, like hard yards, to work out something that eventually became industry standard.
I've been playing Duke Nukem 3D on the Evercade, and
it's quite hard work, isn't it?
Can't do it. Can't do it. Cannot do it. Cannot do it. Yeah, it's just simply. Anyway, my headlines.
Yes.
Coming in hot off the back of last month's Netherlands episode, I decided to play all the Rusty Lake games. Well, 16 of them at least, because me and you still need to find time to play the co-op only installment, which would then bring my tally to a full complement of 17. I love them all. I love the world. I love the atmosphere. I love puzzles. I heartily recommend them to any and all, as did, of course, you last month. If you want to know more details about the Rusty Lake games, listen to last month's episode and then jump into the Discord, because there's a few of us playing through them on there as well. Not recommended to any and all is the freebie Silent Hill game that Shadow dropped during Sony's last State of Play, subtitled The Short Message. Not only was it not short enough, its 2-hour runtime should have been 3 hours shorter, but the message it had was... but the message itself it had was shit at best and deeply offensive at worst. As it essentially fetishizes mental health disorders, self-harm and domestic abuse as mere sledgehammer precision tools to make a game scary. Doesn't even do that. I think my best appraisal of the game is that for a free game, it's a colossal waste of money. It's damning, isn't it?
Yeah. It reminds me, do you know, in that Stuart Lee routine about James Corden, where it was when he first moved to do the Late Show, wherever it was in America, and he just said, Britain's loss is America's loss also.
Yeah. It's true. Next headline. I played through Mortal Kombat 1, the soft reboot of the series. I don't really like beat-em-up games, but I do love the absurdly hilarious, over-the-top, gory action and stupidly fantastical lore of these games. Sometimes I just watch all the cutscene collections from the games on YouTube for a laugh. I enjoy them as a movie. Sometimes I watch the movies as a movie. It's a shame that some of the really fun additional content in the game, like Homelander and Omni-Man, those characters from The Boys and Invincible, they're behind paywalls. And they're just essentially, from what I can tell, they're just additional fighters to play as. There's not like storylines with them like crossing over into this universe, which maybe would have been worth paying a few quid for. But I will enjoy watching their silly fatalities on YouTube at some point. But it's fine, it's a Mortal Kombat game. My last headline, I decided to play through both Portal and Portal 2 for the first time in many, 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 many years. And it was incredible. Because, well, I'd totally forgotten 90% of the content of the game. I'd forgotten 100% of the puzzle solutions, and also got more stupid, probably. And... like, both games hold up miraculously well. The Switch ports have no right to be as good as they are. They are flawless. They play flawlessly, 60 frames per second, sharp and smooth as anything. Loading times were a little bit, well, loading times were fine, but you sort of get used to SSD loading times after you've been playing on Steam Decks and PS5s and stuff. The second Portal game continues to be one of the very finest games ever made. It still makes me chuckle at many points with how brilliant the dialogue is. It makes me laugh when I crack a puzzle, just out of sheer satisfaction.
Yeah.
It still astounds me that Stephen Merchant was cast in it at that point in his career. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant, brilliant game. Shame on you for never having played it.
Yeah. Back when you talked about it on the podcast, I bought a copy on the Xbox 360, and I probably own it in my Steam library as well. There's many ways I could approach it. I've got it on the Switch. I even bought that collection at some point. Just never played it. Never got around to it.
We should also do the co-op of that at some point, because I played.
Yes. Yeah.
I played a bit of it with Minty back in day. I'm sure didn't me and you start having a go at it?
We did like the first hour maybe when you were down here once, but it was in between doing other things and other jobs, and it's quite lengthy, isn't it? It's like quite a long campaign, I think, the co-op one.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like hour and you're done. It was a bit more of an investment.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to the big chunks, Chris. What have you put some sizable shit into?
Big chunks. We need a little sound effect for that.
Yeah.
This take will be a bit late to the party.
Oh no! You're going to talk about how Ocarina of Time is. It's
a good game. Have you played it?
It's a good game. Yeah.
No, it'll be a bit late. It'll be a bit late to the party because this game launched roughly when we recorded last month's episode. But after playing in dribs and drabs for the last month or so since launch, I can offer the semi-official O3C Games opinion that Palworld, the game du jour on Steam, is absolutely fine.
There we go.
It's not the best thing ever, as some of the zeitgeist might suggest, but it's also definitely not the worst thing ever, which seems to be the contrarian line that sites like Eurogamer took around launch. It's an open-world survival come monster collecting game, and the developers took the framework and the visual styling of Pokemon Arceus, I think mainly, the survival and crafting of games like Ark or Rust or Subnautica, the base building and factory automation of games like Factorium, even the sparse piano jingles of Breath of the Wild, and then just whisked it all up in a big pot. And the result is an early access game, Palworld, and it's perfectly decent. Like, it's more polished than you'd expect in some areas.
I'm sure it's more polished than Pokemon Violet or Scarlet.
This is it. But it's still obviously far less polished than others, But because it's outwardly marked as a game that is in active development, you can't really complain too much. It's not like a yearly Pokemon game launching and falling to pieces. This is a smaller team making a game and, kind of acknowledging bits don't work quite as we'd like them to, but hopefully in time they will. And, what can you say? Its success, I think, is not just because of its likeness to Pokemon, but rather because it uses the Pokemon analogues to put a really inviting or acceptable face on a whole range of genres that I'd otherwise just not be interested in at all.
Yeah.
And I think other people probably feel the same way. So as much as I like wandering about in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, which there are definitely notes of in Palworld, I've never had the inclination or interest to dive into a proper hardcore survival sim like Ark. It just does not interest me.
Yeah.
And Palworld kind of softens the edges by making roaming mobs a bit less dangerous and death is a bit less painful. And the collecting and crafting and building is a bit more streamlined. So it's just a bit more approachable, a bit more inviting than other games in the genre. The factory automation stuff as well, I was a bit concerned about because the more I read, it was like, no, this is a big deal in Palworld. But you're just essentially putting your little guys to work, not just in battle, but also in production servitude. But again, it's much closer to the kind of light, make 100 of these to make 10 of these to produce one of these loop that something like Forager had.
Yeah.
And so again, I liked Forager because it wasn't spreadsheety and it wasn't obtuse. And Palworld, just like that, is quite open, quite welcoming. I think a lot has been made of the Pokemon with guns angle as well, that the hype trailers promised. But I've played it for like 15, 20 hours or so now across the last month or so. It hasn't really been the case. I've got a few of my pals that have their own kind of weaponry and things like that, but it's not quite, at least like the trailers made out, where I had, or should have, a horde of Pokemon alikes holding AK-47s. It doesn't seem to work like that. And I've just as with all these sort of games, I've enjoyed running about the world, and then when I hit certain skill tree upgrades, I've now been flying and gliding around the world on the backs of my Pokemon, not Pokemon. I've got a little base from which to organise my production operations. I've tried to fill out my Pokédex, not Pokédex. But yeah, I haven't gone to war like the trailers have suggested. And while certain creatures can accompany you in fights and they'll do their own bits and bobs and they'll kind of help you out in battle, it's hardly the kind of anime Call of Duty. So if that's what you're after, it's not that. It's not that. Instead, I just think it's a decent game that kind of amalgamates bits of a whole bunch of genres that I'd otherwise pretty much ignore. So it's nice. It's fine. It's not that expensive, really, in the grand scheme of things. Probably a soft recommend if it kind of appeals. Performance on the Steam Deck is a bit patchy, unless you opt for lowest of the low settings, but it is playable with a bit of tinkering. It's just not super smooth. But, you know, if you are someone like you that dealt with overall Pokemon Scarlet and Violet,
oh god,
you'll probably be fine. You know, it's not going to be a 60 frames per second super smooth kind of experience, but at least in its early access period, it's all right. I'd probably recommend it. You know, I've certainly enjoyed my time with it mostly. It is cynical, which is kind of like a big criticism of it, in that it's drawing from very obvious inspirations, but it's still not cynical in the same way that Ed Sheeran cynically makes pop music. You know, because I think there's a level of effort here beyond take popular thing, add popular thing, and then make money, which is what Ed Sheeran has done pretty much his whole career once he had a bit of a platform.
Yeah.
I mean, if nothing else, I've been more drawn to its interlocking systems, no matter how familiar they may feel in isolation, than most modern AAA Sony titles, like we discussed last episode.
Yeah.
And again, maybe that's just me, or maybe that's a really kind of damning praise or kind of criticism of one or the other. But it's interesting for me to note that I have no interest in playing Horizon. But when Palworld popped up, I was like, yeah, give it a go.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it deserves its current billing as one of the most played Steam games of all time. I think that's a bit too far. But I think maybe the most interesting thing to come from it is probably that Nintendo and Game Freak have had to make a pretty sudden realization that it's actually quite hard first to claim infinitely and in perpetuity that you own the rights to concepts such as collecting monsters and animals with anime eyes.
Yeah.
You know. So when they've kind of tried to say, "Oh, we've got the legal team on the case," it's like, for what, really? You know, and unless there is an outwardly stolen design, what can you copyright in there?
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting as well because they've had so long to modernize Pokemon, to give it, you know, time to breathe and evolve, and instead they've driven their own flagship property into the ground by all accounts. And
while
maybe
still selling more than
well, this is the problem, isn't
it's mad.
But,
yeah.
But maybe something like this might act as the wake-up call for kind of the Pokemon cash cow to take stock, spend a bit more time in the pasture, and just like sit back a little bit before its next mainline entry.
Yeah.
Because Nintendo and Game Freak could do all this stuff better if they wanted to relift any of these elements back to their own property. They could take out the stuff that doesn't really work. They could smooth the edges of the stuff that almost works. They could polish it all up, wait a couple of years and be like, here's Arceus 2. And you're all going to love it because you like the first one. And this is 100 times smoother. And it's on the Switch too. And everyone's flying around and it's running nice and smoothly. It's not a big job, really. And I'm hopeful in a way that because this has done gangbusters, this really has like captured the interest of millions, that Nintendo might go, quite like a bit of that pie again.
Yeah.
And it's right there. It's right there for the taking. So who knows?
Eat the pie.
Just eat the pie.
Just eat the bloody pie.
Just eat the bloody pie. Do you want to serve me up a big chunk of pie?
Yeah, I do. Do you remember many episodes ago when you set me the challenge of playing Cave Noir on the Game Boy?
Yeah. Yes.
A
Good
brilliant, light years ahead of its time roguelike dungeon crawler that didn't even make it outside of Japan.
Yeah.
At the time, I said this would be a perfect game for the Playdate, and I clearly wasn't the only one to think that, because Under the Castle has now been released on the Playdate catalogue, and it is utterly superb, and is Cave Noir. God. So Under the Castle takes the general premise of Cave Noir and puts its own sort of twist on it. You're presented with, but honestly,
gonna buy it now.
Yeah, honestly, like talking to you is one of maybe 12 people who have played Cave Noir.
Yeah.
Like I'm not just saying, oh, it's a bit like Cave Noir. This is basically somebody's their starting point was, can I make Cave Noir for the Playdate? Fantastic.
Do you reckon I can do this live for the YouTube audience? Which way am I cranking?
I don't know.
I have to press A first, don't I? Hang on. Crank to buy. I haven't got the sound on, but has it done the little whizzer yet?
I think so, yeah.
You've been billed.
Yeah. Hey, there we go. Unfortunately, Under the Castle does not deliver on any... and is, if anything, a waste of your money.
Certainly not worth the $10 it's being sold for.
So Under the Castle takes the general premise of Cave Noir. It puts its own twist on it. You are presented with 3 different dungeon types, offering a uniquely different challenge to complete, requiring very different strategies. Either you'll be tasked to defeat a set amount of enemies before the exit portal will spawn, or you'll have to collect a set amount of orbs to recover from the dungeon. Twist here is that you only have a limited amount of inventory slots for your weapons, armor and potions and spells and stuff, and each orb will take up its own slot, forcing you to sacrifice precious equipment to fulfill the quest. And then you have the third dungeon, where you have to free a set number of prisoners, and to do that you need to collect keys from defeating enemies or finding them in chests and then hunting out the prisoners to free, which is a great mix of both dungeon types, really. And the game works in a classic turn-based way, with every square or tile of movement you make triggering enemies to make one piece of movement, which may be patrolling on a certain path, or moving randomly, or shooting projectiles, or casting spells. You can move into enemies to attack them, and this may have a small back and forth determining who comes out the victor. You will take damage, so you'll need to gear up accordingly, finding the balance between a strong weapon, a solid shield, or some scrolls of various spells. And the rooms and floors are randomly generated, but from a set of pre-designed tile sets, so it always feels fresh, but also tightly designed too, with hidden paths and secrets to find in the dungeon walls. Every time you find a new piece of equipment, it gets added to the dungeon foyers for you to choose from before your next attempt. And there's a really cool mix of things you can choose from, like weapons and armor with wildly different strategic abilities, and health and mana potions if you're going off on a more offensive adventure. And you get to carefully choose your loadout depending on what objective you're trying to fulfill. And it's always exciting when you discover a new item to see how that could help complement a certain build that you're finding effective in a certain dungeon. But what of the crank? Let's not forget the crank, boys.
Let's not.
Turning your little handle allows you to disappear up inside your magic hat. What?
I don't know why turning the little handle. Just turning your little handle.
Turning your little handle.
Very immature. Oh dear.
Turning your little handle allows you to disappear up inside your magic hat and float invisibly around the map, crossing gaps in the floor and evading enemies. However, you only have a very limited amount of magic power to use this mechanic, so as with the rest of the game, you have to be very careful when you choose to use it. Every time you clear a level of the dungeon, it gets harder the next time. I'm not sure how high these levels go, but they continue to increase in size and difficulty for a lot of levels, and it's only after you reach a certain level on all of the dungeons that you then unlock the final boss, which is genuinely like a showstopper event, it feels like. It's amazing what they do to combine all of the elements of the game into one sort of final gauntlet challenge. And even then, the game isn't over, because there are loads of pieces of equipment and items and stuff that you won't have unlocked until you reach some really deep levels of the dungeon. Even when you've unlocked everything, just keep challenging yourself to beat increasingly harder dungeons. And why wouldn't you? Because the gameplay is so good. Like, of the more typical games on the Playdate, Under the Castle is a real contender for the best Playdate game I've played. Whereas something like Core Fault is a phenomenal stab at creating like a Vampire Survivors-like game on the Playdate, and mostly succeeding.
Yeah.
Under the Castle is the sequel Cave Noir deserved, and it is extraordinarily good. I can't recommend it highly enough. If you own a Playdate, spend the £10 or whatever it is, spend the $10, whatever currency it may be, bucks or otherwise, and have a bloody good time with your little handle.
I will.
It's so good. I can't wait for you to play it. Like, it's brilliant.
It's like you said it was. This is off air here. You said it was good when you had mentioned playing it, but sometimes you need the vim and vigor of hearing it spoken about properly.
I should have sent you a voice note, shouldn't I?
You should have. I probably would have bought it there and then.
Apart from the fact that I played this on set, so I had to be really quiet.
Don't want to disturb your mate.
Exactly, but it's how I managed to do all the Rusty Lake games, because I was like, well, I can't, like the Playdate, even like the click of the button. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
But the Rusty Lake, I was just
tapping away,
touch screening it.
Tapping
amazing. What else you played, Big Chunk?
Oh, a few things. I'm going to list a few gaming things that I absolutely love that will bring us to the games I'm going to talk about. I love the Steam Deck wholeheartedly, unreservedly, for becoming pretty much the only gaming device I need to satiate any genre desire or any historical gaming interest in portable or docked big screen format. It does it all. I love emulation and its power to rejuvenate old games in a way that can make certain titles feel about as modern as anything released on contemporary platforms. I love retroachievement.com's community for endlessly adding value to older titles, encouraging me to revisit games I may have loved but ignored for a few years, pick up brand new titles, or just act as a place to hang out to discuss obscure ports and releases that were actually stone cold classics. Like the odd Time Warner version of Virtua Racing on the Saturn, really good.
Oh, yeah.
The GBA version of Doom, incredibly impressive. Or Donald Duck Going Quackers on the N64, which manages to be a really good Crash Bandicoot clone. I had a lot of fun playing. And finally, I love games directed by Tetsuya Mitsuguchi. Think Lumines, Tetris Effect, Rez. These three all sit officially in my top 10 games of all time. And combining all of these loves together, I have spent so much of the last month replaying both the Dreamcast version of Rez and the PSP version of Lumines via emulation on the Steam Deck, marvelling at how good both can look when upscaled on a crisp OLED screen. And in the case of Rez, being surprised how close it feels to its modern Infinite version, even on the OG Dreamcast release, because you can have it hacked to display in widescreen, and it looks as good as the modern version does. I won't talk too much about the games themselves because it feels like it would be retreading old ground. Like, go back and listen to the corresponding episodes from the top 10 season of the podcast if you really want deep dives on either Rez or Lumines. But despite not playing either for a little while, both games remain right up there with my very, very, very favourite games. Both deliver exactly what I want from video games, something that is visually and aurally arresting, something that you can get better at, something that's addictive and replayable but doesn't demand like massive, massive investment in terms of a huge story or a massive RPG or something like that. After a few weeks concerted play of both games, I am now on the home stretch of the combined achievement lists. I beat Lumines 100% a few days ago, and I'm just a few skill-based challenges away from mastering Rez as well. Lumines took about 40 hours. It's the only puzzle game that gets close to Tetris for me. It just does something to my brain that means once I start playing, I find it borderline impossible to stop. It's bizarre. Like, even Tetris, I can pause and move away from. But Lumines, once I'm involved, if Georgia says, could you come and do this thing? It's like, no. no, I shan't be doing that. I'm not moving until this is done. For those that have never played it, it seems like it should be really simple. It's just square drops. Each one is made up of 4 blocks. They can be one of 2 colours, and you make new squares using the same colour. That's it. But for a new player going in cold, it can have a brutal difficulty curve. And people often boast about games being simple to pick up but tough to master, and that's kind of the gold standard you're looking for. But I genuinely believe that for most people, Lumines is really tough to pick up and borderline impossible to master. Like, it takes such a time investment to really get it. But I can proudly say I am very, very good at Lumines, probably better than I am at Tetris, and I've played both for thousands of hours collectively across different formats. Even with 20 plus years of muscle memory, though, and experience with the franchise, I was unprepared for just how hard I'd find the game's ultimate achievement. In this, it was to max out the game's score counter in its standard challenge mode at 999,999 points, just one short of 1 million. You need to play at the very top of your game for 2 solid hours to hit this, just like unwavering, full focus for 2 hours.
God.
Like in the early game, you can make a mistake. It's not really that much to fret over. But once you climb past, say, 750,000, you feel like you're on the home stretch. Things are moving fast enough that a single wrong move can bring a run tumbling down within a few sweeps of the timeline, like literally 60 seconds later, failed, go home. And this challenge alone took 30 hours of attempts, like easily. Like I failed at 950,000, I failed at 960,000. The most painful one, I hit 990,000 points and then just fell apart. That was when Georgia was sat on the other side of the room. Her friend had come over. They were just having a nice chat, and I was just sat there on the Steam Deck. And I just went, oh! just placed it on the table and just sat with my head in my hands. And then Georgia's friend Mandy was like, go and see him, make sure he's okay. And Georgia was like, it's nothing important, really. But I did it.
Oh, gosh.
And it was great. I mean, Rez has been much softer. I'm still having a lovely time with it. I'm probably 15, maybe 20 or so hours into this one. It's just a really comforting game for me. And It's been an additional treat as this playthrough elicited one of my favourite ever game reviews from Georgia too, on anything I've played. She walked into the room. I was midway through a run in Rez. You got the techno soundtrack blaring. There's colourful lights bouncing all over the walls of the room. And she remarked, if you weren't holding the controller, I would have just assumed you were watching a screensaver. and as a review of the general kind of look and feel of Rez, I think that's pretty apt.
Yeah.
You know, Rez is a game, I think, honestly, that you could believe was released last week, such as its kind of timeless visual design. You know, it wasn't of its time, and therefore it can never be of any time. You know, but it's great. And my recommendations then for listeners, in order of importance: number one, if you don't own one, go and beg, borrow, or steal to purchase a Steam Deck, because if you enjoy games in any capacity, this is like a one-stop shop with a bit of work. It's just been a daily joy to own and play.
Can't be stopped.
Number two, please find a way to play Rez, whether in its Dreamcast or PS2 or Xbox 360 or PS4 or PS5 or Steam housing. It's so good. And as much as I put Tetris Effect up in my number one spot and it knocked Rez down when we did our addendum season, when I play Rez this regularly, I start thinking, oh, it could be number one. So they're really closely tied. And three, if you're into difficult block dropping puzzle games, give Lumines a genuine try, but be prepared in the same way. If you decide to learn the guitar, you're going to have a bad time for a few hours before it starts to click. Like, it will sound like shit and your fingers will hurt. So just you know, give it a chance. Lastly, this is kind of an additional one. Give retro achievements a peek if you want to spice up your retro gaming. If you're comfortable using emulators, it's become such an astonishing project, really. It's a unified system now that is applied across multiple emulators for multiple platforms. It's all developed by distinct developers and teams. Every achievement set is just individual people in their bedroom going, I really like Lumines, and I think other people would like a reason to play it again. It's just really, really impressive. I love the community aspect. Like I've talked before about Clone Hero and what that community meant to that game. I remember discussing with Minty about like Doom mods and things like that. I just love when people take games and make them a community thing themselves. Yeah. And it's just great. I've had such a nice time with it.
Oh, I'm just having a little look at retro achievements now and looking at things like because you know me, I don't know. I find if I get sucked into like achievements or things like that, it's bad.
Yeah.
But
it's not good for the brain.
It's not good for the brain or the thumbs or the wives. But I'm having a look at
Sega Saturn?
Yeah. Shrine of the Holy Ark.
Yeah.
Looking at like what some of the harder or like the biggest sort of challenges are and stuff. And like, well, I mean, I could probably do all these, but with something like Shrine of the Holy Ark, it's just like play the game, get everything.
Yeah. Just find all of the fairies and things like that. All of the little guys. Yeah.
Easy.
Of course.
Obviously. Yeah.
Tempting.
Right. So the big game that I played last month, apart from all those other big games, was the first real 2024 release that I was anticipating, which was Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown.
Oh, yeah. I totally forgot.
Yeah. A fresh take returned to the series, presenting the game as a 2D action-adventure Metroidvania stuffed with puzzles, platforms, and silly bosses. The good news is that it is a really, really good game. The bad news is that as far as 2D action-adventure Metroidvanias stuffed with puzzles, platforms, and silly bosses go, the bar is exceptionally high.
Yeah.
I remember a teacher friend of mine telling me that he changes his marking strategy when marking essays depending on how advanced the student is. For most students, he's going through marking up all the things they get right, all the boxes they check off on the marking criteria. But for some who he always had full confidence that they'd hand in something, excellent, he'd be like, well, let's just start at full marks and work backwards. I'm just going to dock marks for the rare errors or omissions that those students might make. And it's like that here. With a modern Metroidvania, when you've got some of the very, very best examples of the medium sat in that genre, you're always going to be comparing a new one to the apex of the subgenre. So for Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, I start at Eterna Noctis, Hollow Knight, Metroid Dread, Ori and the Blind Forest, and I knock marks off where the game falls short.
Yeah.
Which admittedly means I felt more negative about this game than most people who are coming to the genre more freshly. Because objectively, if you reviewed this game in a vacuum, you'd struggle to breathe.
That's so stupid.
You'd still have a better time than playing Silent Hill: The Short Message.
Yeah.
But if you remove comparison as a reviewing tool, this game is a really good 8 out of 10 game. Because they do so many things right with the game. The combat is really satisfying with some cool upgrade trees and special abilities to unlock to augment your fighting prowess. Lots of combos and things like that to master as well. The general platforming is fun, although not hugely challenging, but it will certainly test you if you're trying to get some of the harder collectibles. Although annoyingly, a lot of those collectibles are just special coins that you can use to buy and upgrade various abilities, but you can also buy the coins themselves with much more easily obtainable currency. So it kind of removes a lot of the inclination to try and get them because their worth is generally quite low, even though it is fun to do the challenge for the sake of, doing the challenge, but it would have been nice to have the reward, have a small modicum of premia about it. What a cunt. Speaking of abilities, there are some cool mechanics in Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown that I haven't seen in games before, like creating a shadow version of yourself which will remain in place, allowing you to teleport back to it. It's great in puzzle solving, but also really good in combat too, because if you, say, charge a big sword swing attack and create a shadow version of yourself, that will stay charged with your shadow until you zip back and unleash it, allowing you to do a nice timed or double powered sword.
That's not
thing.
A million miles away from Braid.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
One of the powers in that is similar, isn't it? You kind of have to bounce off yourself and things like that to kind of get to platforms. I can't remember. I haven't played it for many years now.
No, it's a really, really good comparison point, actually, because there's another another mechanic, which a similar sort of thing with a shadow version of yourself is actually just feels like it's straight out of Braid. Now I think about it.
Co-designed by Jonathan Blow.
Yeah. There's these really, really fun puzzle rooms where you basically create shadow versions of yourself. And you have to sort of run and do a certain action and path with one of them, and then you go back and your shadow version does that whilst you do another one, and essentially forces you to do 2, 3, or 4 player co-op by yourself, carefully anticipating your future self's path.
That's cool.
Which, I'd say those bits were probably the highlight of the game for me, because they were the thing doing something, what I thought was most different, but I don't know. Yeah.
Pissed on my bonfire.
Yeah. No, well, what can I say? This game blows. there are other abilities that feel like they've, again, it's probably just seen what other games have done, and try to do it like what Eterna Noctis does. Do like a rough copy of it whilst making it enough of a change to avoid being sued. Although, like, yeah, appreciate the idea of like firing an arrow and being able to teleport to it like you do in Eterna Noctis. It's not like earth-shakingly original. The way it's deployed in Eterna Noctis with like pinpoint precision is utterly extraordinary. And here it's just a bit woolly. It doesn't sort of have the zip required to make it like really, really cool and fun. But if you haven't played Eterna Noctis, you'll probably enjoy being able to teleport to your chakrams occasionally to solve a couple of puzzles or like get on the arse side of a boss. I mean, the game does have the now classic medallion mechanic system that was present in Hollow Knight. It's also featured in loads of games like Blue Fire or Eterna Noctis. I think it's in the Ori games as well. It's been so long since I played those. Where you can basically equip various amulets or medallions or bits of twat or whatever that will slightly augment various mechanics, whether that's increasing the power of certain attacks or movement mechanics or health boosts or other things, so you can mix and match those to help you get the edge over whatever environmental challenge you're facing. The writing and voice acting in Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is abysmal. I zoned out almost immediately from the story when I met these characters, and you keep bumping into them as well, triggering more dialogue scenes that just weren't engaging. It's not even necessary. Like, you look at something like Ori and the Blind Forest, like pretty much all of that story is told without words or lengthy cutscenes, and I cared more about the characters in that game than some of the members of my own family.
Oh, really?
Because if the story and characters aren't going to be fizzing with intrigue, just leave them out. Just have it be a game to play. Like, if you can't tell a good story, stop slowing me down. Like, at least you're able to skip the dialogue scenes here if you do get thoroughly fed up with their inconsequence. It definitely suffers from, like, Ubisoft-itis.
Yeah.
Even though this game comes from the strand of Ubisoft responsible for delights such as Rayman Origins, Rayman Legends, it definitely feels like some Assassin's Creed devs have snuck into the office to pepper the game with boring collectibles and nuggets of bullshit lore loosely based on history. The art style in Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown isn't great. I see what they're doing with it, and it's fine in principle, but it's not helped by the fact that there's also a sizable downgrade in visuals when it comes to the ambient lighting and textures on the Switch port.
Yeah.
I mean, the game does at least run at a fairly consistent 60 frames per second, but I don't know, it's a pretty ugly looking game. It looks more like a GameCube game at times than anything more current, and it's, I don't know. I haven't seen good enough videos. Well, I haven't looked at videos of it running on like the PS5, so I'm not really too sure how much better it does look. But yeah, it's not a looker, but it's fine because it never gets in the way of enjoying playing the game. There's an area of the game which is really, really cool. It's essentially a shipwreck in a thunderstorm that's frozen in time, and I enjoyed exploring that a lot. There was a couple of areas that were quite cool and quite atmospheric, but I don't know, they're just the game just sort of lacks that invitation to explore that you get with games that do have like more of a lush artistic aesthetic to it.
Yeah.
Even though, there are some nice and distinct areas in the game, they all sort of look a bit bland, so you're never champing at the bit to see what's in the next room, what's the next area going to be. On the topic of exploration and wanting to explore, it doesn't help that the game is a bit of a clumsy fast travel system. You've got your save points, your bonfires, if you will, but your fast travel points are different to those. And whilst they'll probably be based near a magic tree save point, I was really hoping that at some point I'd unlock the ability just to travel between save points rather than fast travel points, because it started to become a real chore to like mop up all the collectibles and secrets and explore any sort of dead ends, especially in the late game, because like a game like this, for me, it really relies on traversal being really fun to make me happy to go for 100% on it, and it's just not quite there. Like even something like the Spider-Man games, like especially like Spider-Man 2, I think it's fine. It's like it's a bit nothingy when it comes to everything else apart from the gameplay, which is so fun that I was happy to go and explore all of that stuff. I was more than happy with. Unfortunately, the music in Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown isn't much to write home about either.
Ding dong.
This is another element that usually really encourages exploration. I want to hear what beautiful themes are in the next areas, or hear how pumping the next piece of boss music is. It's not that the music is bad, it's fine, it's just not great. I don't know. The other thing that disappointed me about this game is that there were quite a few bugs and glitches present in the game. And I thought this, at first I thought this was a side effect of me. I actually got the game a few days early, so I got it about 3 or 4 days before its actual release because my pre-order just showed up.
Yeah.
And I thought, maybe the classic day one patch hasn't been released. But during my playtime of the game, it received a fair few updates, and it did address a few of the glitches. But you really expect a degree of polish in these games, especially from a really big developer. It was a shame that it didn't have that. I got stuck in a few walls, I glitched through some gaps, and it really compromises your trust in the game when, you're always trying to push the boundaries of what you can do and where you can go with the mechanics that the game gives you. Am I meant to have actually got through this wall? Do I need an ability to get over it? Or have I just broken the game? I don't know. The biggest criticism I can weigh against Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is that for everything this game does well, in all elements across the entire game, I can think of several examples of games that have done it better. We have been truly spoiled. At least, I appreciate the game's ambition to break some new ground with some of its mechanics, but if you're not going to do something groundbreakingly different, you have to be able to measure up to the best in class. And there's never going to be a point in my life where I'd rather play this game again instead of replaying Hollow Knight, Metroid Dread, Ori and the Blind Forest, or Return of Noctis. Funny thing is, still recommend this game because it's really, really good.
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. If they continue to develop this new strand of the franchise in this way, I'll be keeping a good eye out for what comes next. I hope they push the boundaries a bit further next time, because it could be really, really good. It'd be great to have a proper 2D Metroidvania with a big studio budget behind it. You look at something like Metroid Dread, which is just dripping in quality, and if indie developers can nail the genre, the subgenre, then the big AAA companies really should be giving them a run for their money. Literally,
pull your finger out,
or just give them their money. If you can't give them a run for their money, give them your money.
Yeah,
that's it. Oh, the world right. It's the next stop, Christopher.
Hey!
Oh, we're racking up the air miles now.
We're on holiday.
Last month we were in the Netherlands. We actually just what's it called? Interrailed.
Yes. Yeah.
We just interrailed a little bit south, east to get to Poland.
I'm not even
My
going to
geography's
say.
crap.
I don't want to expose myself to be even crapper than your crap.
Oh, it's really crap.
I'll just say it's in a different direction from where we started, and I know you can get there by rail.
There we go.
That'll do.
I've been there. I know a lot about it. And I know a lot about the games from there. And if that's the real location, do you want to know some facts about Poland before we start?
Yes, always yes.
The world's biggest castle is in Poland, as is the biggest mammal in Europe, the European bison. Oh, it's a beast.
Oh, big boy.
Vodka was actually invented in Poland.
Was it?
Yeah. As were windscreen wipers, bulletproof vests, vitamins, and rubber condoms.
What a claim to fame.
Yeah. The greatest classical composer of all time, Chopin, was Polish, as were many other Polish people. And also... That's dumb. But also remember, you can only be known as a pole dancer if you are actually a Polish dancer. Otherwise, you should technically be known as a sparkling stripper.
It's a good one.
That's dumb.
That's a good one. Oh, would you like to hear about the games of Poland?
Love to, Chris. Love to.
Let's bring this back on message. Let's make it a bit more highbrow. I think we can argue that Poland, of the countries we've visited so far, may have the greatest contemporary games output. And we're not basing this on quality per se, but rather through the breadth of immediately recognisable games that can be attributed back to Polish developers. So without even needing to Google, a decent chunk of people would know that CD Projekt Red of Cyberpunk and The Witcher fame are Polish. A smaller handful would probably know that Techland, who are responsible for Dead Island, for Dying Light, for Call of Juarez, they're all Polish as well. Going a little bit off the beaten path, Bloober team, who are currently working on the upcoming Silent Hill 2 remake, and who were previously responsible for Layers of Fear, the Blair Witch game, and Observer, they're Polish. And outside of these bigger names, though, casting an eye over a list of notable games developed in Poland, there are so many AA and indie titles that I had no idea were developed in the country. So you've got simulation hits on the PC like House Flipper or Car Mechanic Simulator, both Polish.
Yeah.
The PS2 3D platformer Cow the Kangaroo, which I remember, I think my brother owned, it was from a Polish studio. Early entries in what we now call the boomer shooter genre, like Bulletstorm, Painkiller, the Shadow Warrior reboots, Project Warlock, all Polish developers. Indie titles like Book of Demons, Datura, Golf Peaks, Phantom Doctrine, McPixel, 911 Operator, which is always on sale on the eShop on the Switch. And again, there's loads more, all Polish. And there's a whole range as well of blink and you'll miss them big publisher efforts that ended up straight in bargain bins months after release, like the Square Enix backed Outriders, the Nordic Games published Deadfall Adventures, the quite recent Focus Entertainment's Evil West, all Polish games that, released to very little fanfare and didn't make much of a ripple, but they're big enough for me to have recognised all these names straight away just glancing over this list. The massive list as well, it barely scratches the surface of the modern games output of Poland, and that's to say nothing of early home computer efforts too, on machines like the Commodore 64, the ZX Spectrum. At the time, Poland was having a pretty rough time, and yet games were still coming out and trickling out kind of under the post-war communist curtain that existed in some part well into the 1980s. There was still a game scene going on. One other up-and-coming developer of Polish origin worth mentioning is One More Level Games, who are responsible for the fantastic but grueling Ghostrunner and its recent sequel. Now, am I right in thinking that you, Mr. I Eat Hard Games for Breakfast Done, might have some thoughts on this series?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You didn't mention This War of Mine.
Oh, is that a Polish developer as well?
It is. Yeah.
I feel bad. That probably should have been on the list.
You should mention it. Do a little thing. Do
This
a little
War of
insert. Yeah.
Polish? Yep. Would you realise?
You can do a bit. Do a line. Do it. Just spin it. Spin it.
Is it definitely
powerful? Yeah, the incredibly powerful This War of Mine that Jonathan inducted into his list in the amendment season was developed by Warsaw-based 11-bit studios.
That was very good.
I know. Now you do it.
The incredibly powerful This War of Mine, which I believe landed on your list. I can't remember where it ended up in your top 100, by Warsaw-based 11-bit studios, also Polish developed.
There we go.
Cut that in.
Yep. What is it with Poland and Cyberpunk games?
I love it.
Between
love
Cyberpunk itself and Ghostrunner, which honestly, if you get to put up 2 screenshots to somebody who hadn't played either game,
yeah,
you couldn't tell the difference. I reckon. But I was really, really pleased to see that Ghostrunner, but I was really, really pleased to see that the devs of Ghostrunner were a Polish company, because I had a great time with the first game, and I had the second one sat ready to go on my Steam Deck, just waiting for the opportunity to do just that, and just that this was. So I've gone out and out on the dumb, haven't I, on this?
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, I know you do. That's why I do it. Thanks, babe. So the brief overview. Ghostrunner and Ghostrunner 2, they're very fast-paced first-person action platform games. We've described them on here before as a sort of 3D Hotline Miami crossed with Super Meat Boy affair wrapped up in a cool cyberpunk aesthetic. You're armed with a sword, some shurikens, and several powers to help you zip around these stages, smelling crime, busting heads, and then back to the lab for some full penetration, and then smell crime, you back out again, bust some heads, back to the lab for some more full penetration, smell crime, bust some heads, back to the lab, smell crime, bust some heads, penetration, lab, penetration, full penetration, and this goes on and back and forth for 6 or 7 hours or so until the game just sort of ends. If you haven't seen that scene from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia...
I haven't.
then I have probably come off a lot more funny than I deserve to be.
Oh.
Now, the first game was a much more stage or level-based game with areas ranging from small and tight close quarters stuff or sort of intricate platforming to larger areas bustling with a range of different enemy types, and you fail a lot. You die a lot. You miss jumps and you miss grapples and you miss time blocks and parries, and you catch the odd bullet, which will always kill you in one hit. And the game, fortunately, just like instant reloads the stage and sees you try again in a blaze of blurry action. Every so often you get a big boss fight, usually in multiple stages, then tests your skill and endurance a little more, and you get upgrades and more powers and all sorts to take on the harder stages. But you can also then go back and beat the older stages to find secrets and collectibles and beat various challenges and time trials and stuff like that. Fortunately, all of the great stuff from Ghostrunner 1 is back in Ghostrunner 2, but it has also bulked the game out a lot more. I don't know if any of like the individual like combat stages or platforming stages are necessarily bigger or more complex, but there is now a lot more happening in between the various levels, which isn't altogether a better thing. Like you said the other month about submerged hidden depths, expanding on submerged's core design, but ending up more diluting it than, developing it. Or a film like The Raid, where the first one was just this perfect 100 minutes of action, and then the second one came along and was an hour or so longer. All that hour was some fairly mediocre story, just fleshing out the wider crime syndicate stuff, and it didn't really do anything to improve the core of the first film. Like, the action scenes in The Raid 2 were unbelievable, but then their sort of casing was a bit flabby and a bit cheap. So like the hub world, the deeper lore of this story in Ghostrunner 2, it just slows me down getting just into the meat of the game. Even though it's fine to have this lab that you do return to for some full penetration, and then you manage your upgrades and you chat with some of these folks, but I just didn't really care about any of them. I just want to get back out there to bust some heads, to the fast-paced action, get just back into that rhythm, because like the rhythm of this game is where the real hypnotic joy is, and breaking that is always a little jarring. Be like if you had to like pause your game every like 5 minutes in your like 2-hour Lumines run.
Just you can't build up a head of steam in that, can you?
Exactly.
You lose the plot.
I think they've obviously felt the pressure to develop the game and the world into something that can be, I don't know, maybe sustained for future entries, or just simply, all right, got to go bigger and better, bigger and better, bigger and better. Whereas something like Portal and Portal 2, they took a long time to develop, to really justify the expansion of that world. And this feels more like a sort of halfway point, like a 1.5 sequel than like a fully fledged, fully realised, more open world take on this first game. The new main mechanic that's introduced in Ghostrunner 2 is the motorbike that you get. And you now have some high-speed action chase sequences, which also feature some platforming and combat and some cool physics stuff that sees you using your speed to ride up walls and twist the world upside down. And some of this action is really, really thrilling. Like, especially there's this one boss fight that you do on the bike, and it's a hell of a spectacle. And I was playing this on the Switch. I was playing this on the Steam Deck OLED, which, to be fair, like holds the game up pretty well given the speed of which everything is happening at.
Yeah.
I'd be fine if Ghostrunner 2 had these motorbike sections as the more level-based activities or the boss fights. but then there's also just some riding about to get to level stuff, which isn't quite as fun as it could be. There are some like obvious paths to follow, and it's quite cool zipping about the wasteland and popping wheelies over the remains of motorways and buildings and finding a few ramps and things like that. And you can sort of vault off your bike to reach some higher areas and then grapple back to your bike and carry on. But it never really feels truly fluid in the way that traversal feels in the rest of the game. But like I said, like the core of the game is there and really strong, and there's really fun mechanics and a fair few new ones thrown into this game too, which, you know, spices things up. Some work better than others, but those might be developed more in DLC or in Ghostrunner 3. But I don't know, like, I get the feeling that they've sort of just been slamming content out. Like, Ghostrunner 1 came out, then DLC came out, and then Ghostrunner 2 came out, and now there's a DLC roadmap for that. And I don't know, I feel like they need to... Yeah, I think they just need to stop, take stock, and really consider what's going to work, you know, in a bigger, more fully realised game. Because I'm pretty sure that Ghostrunner 2 is also PS4. And let me just double check.
I'm not sure, actually. Probably.
No, it's not.
Oh.
It's not.
Well, next gen only.
Yeah. This game has the feel of a game that has been developed for PS4 and PS5, or, you know, sort of with the last generation in mind, because it feels quite hamstrung by some of those design choices, maybe. But this game is actually just exclusive to this current generation. But it doesn't really feel like they've really lent into what this, you know, new sort of technical generation can offer. And yeah, I really hope that they do. I mean, I'm sure they're going to develop more because the game got good reviews, sold well. There's no reason why, you know, they won't make more. But I hope they maybe look to take it in a different direction. Or I don't know if there is a good sort of like halfway point between like the fast-paced action and then sort of more open world stuff, if you did want to sort of broaden it out. But it's not quite there. It's not quite there. But it could be. It could be. I think there could be an incredible third part in the Ghostrunner trilogy. The other thing which I haven't had a chance to try out yet is a mode in this game called Rogue Runner.
Oh, you love a roguelike.
I love a roguelike. It is a roguelike twist on the Ghostrunner formula. It's meant to be absolutely brilliant. And obviously, because I am a rogueliker, it's right up my cyber alley. So apologies for not having coverage of that to report on. But if it is as good as I've heard, then it could be all I'm talking about next month. I don't know what the DLC roadmap is, actually. I know there is stuff planned. There's a bunch of cosmetic packs and stuff like that, which I'm not going to bother buying. I never played the DLC from the first one, which looked really, really cool. You sort of play through like scenes from the game from the antagonist's point of view and with their sort of unique skill set. So yeah, but I don't know. It's good. It's really, really good, but I don't know. It feels more like Ghostrunner Episode 2 than Ghostrunner 2, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Not quite there yet.
I mean, it's great, though.
You've an
8 out of 10.
A lot of 8 out of 10s today.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there isn't.
You've done well.
Do you want to hear about a not 8 out of 10?
Oh, no. What have you played? I don't know what you played. I don't think you've played Cyberpunk.
No.
I'm hoping that you've played Eminem's Racer, because that's a very you game. The confectionery tie-in street racing game from, I assume, the PS1.
I will fill you in. So a developer that I deliberately ignored in my background section is a developer called Teyon. And they were formed about 20 years ago in Krakow. And Teyon had a largely uneventful, although very fruitful, in terms of number of releases at least, in their first 10 or so years as a studio. But they were mainly producing DS and Wii shovelware. And it looks as if, on paper at least, they were kind of a paycheck-to-paycheck team that would just take on these small contracts and produce a lot of immediately immediately forgettable titles that are largely aimed at kids. So, who could forget classics like Crazy Chicken, Pirates 3D, or Hubert the Teddy Bear, Winter Games, or 1001 Crystal Mazes Collection, or Robot Rescue Revolution. But, Jonathan Dunn, for some reasons, their fortunes changed in 2014. And to add a bit of excitement, I'm going to jump forward to present day and work backwards to reveal that Teyon are responsible for both last year's RoboCop Rogue City, which reviewed quite well,
Cyberpunk.
and 2019's Terminator Resistance.
Cyberpunk.
Which, again, reviewed pretty well, with audiences kind of acknowledging that each game had its flaws, but were generally pretty well-revered takes on iconic franchises. Now, I'm willing to go out on a limb here and say that without 2014's Rambo: the video game, Teyon would never have hit the main stage and would have remained in eShop purgatory. And so, like you kind of alluded to, choosing a game to play this month, I did consider installing Cyberpunk. I bought a copy on the PlayStation 5. I was like, here we go, big game time. Didn't unwrap it. I looked at the shelf and thought, Witcher 3, still got that on the Switch, could play a bit of that. Didn't bother. I considered, like you said, going the real Dumbo route and playing something like Eminem's Kart Racer, which came out on the DS. And it has the exciting title, I found out, of lowest rated kart racing game, as per the hallowed pages of the Guinness World Records 2011 Gamers Edition.
Goodness me.
So it might have been overtaken now by something like Garfield Kart, but at least at the time. But given Teyon's history and their connection to modern gaming's licensed game resurgence and revival, I think it had to be Rambo. As soon as I saw it on the list, I was like, yes, please, that's a bit of me. It released originally for the 360, the PS3, and the PC. Of course, it was already in my Steam library from years ago. Never had played it before, though. Rambo, the video game, lets you play through the rough plot points of the first 3 Sylvester Stallone Rambo films, because the 4th film, which had come out at the time, was a different production studio. They didn't have the rights, so it doesn't appear. And it tries to be as authentic as possible, but the audio is cut from the movies like one of the earlier Lego games.
Oh, God.
And the sound mixing appears to have been done in a toilet. It's really bad. The character models are very recognisable. You know who you're looking at, but they're very wooden in movement, and they've got kind of that Vaseline shine that was the kind of the style of the time in the mid-2010s. The game takes massive liberties with the source material as well to spice things up. Most notable in the surprisingly low on-screen body count of the first film. If anyone's seen it, it's literally maybe 1, depending on how you want to slice it. But here, you are literally mowing down crowds of police with an assault rifle. which is great fun, but perhaps not entirely in keeping with the actual narrative of First Blood Part 1. More confusing than any of this, though, the setup is so weird, like the way the game actually plays. So if you look at screenshots, you just assume that it's a first-person shooter. Most images will show the classic first-person perspective behind the gun. Enemies appear to be popping out of cover. It's Gears of War. It's Uncharted, whatever you want to say. But bizarrely, it's a fixed perspective rail shooter like Time Crisis, but without a light gun. Yeah, basically.
Meet the cop. Who can't be stopped.
So what you're doing, you're just driving a cursor around the right stick, and it feels
that's
awful, even after a few hours of play. Multiple sensitivity tweaks. I was using the Steam input settings as well to be like, I can make this more granular, I can make this work, and I just could not. You're using the left stick then to pop up and down from your hidey hole, as if you'd be using like the pedal in a Time Crisis arcade machine. And just when you start to get the hang of the weird control scheme, the game decides to mix things up by having whole levels which are just QuickTime events. Like just huge interactive cutscenes for very little reason.
No.
And in those, you've got, perfect timing grants a smooth series of clips of Rambo sliding and slinking from silent takedown to silent takedown. And a botched button press will make him knock into enemies and trip over obstacles like a Burke. It's really stupid. And the pairing of a light gun shooter but not with these kind of forced QTEs is so odd for a game of this era. Like, even if it was made on a kind of reduced budget by a relatively inexperienced team, I don't know why they took it in this direction. And this cocktail, when appended to a massive film franchise, though, admittedly one that wasn't hugely relevant at the time, is just even stranger. Like, I really enjoyed sitting there playing and thinking, how and why did Rambo the video game get made? And who approached who to pitch it in the first place? And how did Teyon, who had only made fucking Hubert Bear Goes to Town or whatever get the gig at that stage? Why were they the ones pitching this at all? The team did make a series of games called Heavy Fire that preceded Rambo and looked kind of stylistically to follow a lot of that kind of fixed position arcade shooting gallery format. So maybe that was it. But with most of them performing pretty averagely or poorly in some cases, I just don't know why Teyon ended up making this game. It's impossible to answer any of the questions I've had. But I've had a genuinely great time playing this train wreck, as I always do. And just speaking out loud like these sorts of thoughts out loud and thinking like, as I blast 100 identikit sheriff model characters in a row, why? But it's also, it's made me interested to play both the Terminator and RoboCop games, because I've kind of been interested in them for a while because they're kind of like B-tier licensed games. But I think they both sit on a similar kind of knife edge of the good/bad paradigm, and that always gets me excited.
I know it does.
And Rambo's janky, busted approach makes me way more excited to pick them up, knowing that this was kind of the genesis of this weird trilogy that they've somehow put out. Last little aside that made me laugh. An hour into shooting at first Vietnamese forces and then waging war against a town's police armada, Georgia looked up from clicking away at The Sims next to me and said, "When are the boxing scenes?" So, Rambo the video game is a bad
great.
licensed game that allowed a studio to pitch to make 2 better licensed games, none of which are Rocky.
Oh dear.
And that's Poland.
Yeah. Do you think it was originally being developed to be an arcade game?
Oh, maybe. But I mean, at that time, arcade games just weren't really being made either.
No.
So I'm genuinely really confused. It's such a weird, out of time and out of step release, appended to a strange property for the time.
Yeah, in so many ways.
And at that time as well, it was the end of the 360's lifespan, and licensed games were kind of dying. That was like the kind of end of that window where it was no longer commercially viable to be putting out tie-ins to things in the same way that it had been sort of 10 years earlier on the GameCube and PS2 and Xbox.
It's like when the Warriors game came out.
That's another
just
really
like
old one. I feel like
20 years later.
The Warriors was a good game. It was made by Rockstar. And I think that was like a proper passion project that they were like, we love this film, we can do something with it to kind of tell our own story. And it holds up pretty good. It's basically a 3D Streets of Rage. With kind of like, it's basically the storyline that leads up to the film. So it's sort of a prequel thing. And it's decent, but Rambo is not decent. It is poor, but enjoyably poor.
So there we go. That is Poland in 2 games that represent the entire history and culture of its people.
Yep.
Where are we going next? Do you want to know?
Oh, yeah, 'cause it's your choice. Lay it on me.
It is my choice. It is my choice. Now, the temptation is to choose a destination with a joke that I've already got prepared.
But that is the case.
It's not the case, actually.
Oh, okay.
We are heading to the opposite of Old A-Land. We're going to New Zealand.
Oh, that was a joke in itself. New Zealand. I can't think off the top of my head of any New Zealand studios and games, so this will be exciting.
Well, I can name 2 games, one of which I've started playing. I'm not going to put this in the episode, but I've started playing Dredge, which is New Zealand.
Oh, okay.
And I saw a game that I know you wrote an article about, which is Jackass, the game. It was made in New Zealand.
Was it?
Apparently, yeah. And I thought that could be a good opportunity for you to
actually play it properly. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was such an interesting piece you wrote about that being like the perfect. Or was it an episode we did where it was like the best example of like a video game tie-in or something like that? It was yeah.
It's on the website. It's going back a while now, but no, that could be a good one actually. Old PS2 tut is very much up my alley.
Yeah, developed by Pickpock.
Oh, I know that company. Did they do Jackass?
Yeah, apparently. Well, they weren't called Pickpock then, but think they'll call something else.
just
They did Twang the Fox, Flick Kick.
Oh, they did Into the Dead.
Into the Dead.
That's why I know Pickpock, because I've played a lot of Into the Dead 2 on the Switch. I think I mentioned it in an episode once, actually.
Yeah,
but that's not a bad one. Mini Motorways. Is that? Oh, that's that iOS puzzle game, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't really like it, but
loads of rugby games because New Zealand like rugby. Seek and Destroy, is that? Oh, it's not what I think. I'm thinking of another game that's got a similar name.
Shatter. Balloons.
Oh, so is Sid he?
Yeah.
Oh, so they became Pickpock.
Yeah.
Ah, well, they put out some good stuff back in the day. Shatter is a really interesting version of Breakout because you could like push and pull. And it kind of made it far more skill-based than most of those games normally are. So that's a good one. I think it's got a recent port. Yeah, Shatter Remastered. There you go, 2022. Switch. I'd recommend that.
Okay, cool.
Remaster published by Netflix. It's probably on the Netflix app, so you might be able to get it for free on the phone.
Yeah.
What else am I thinking? There's another one of theirs.
I'm not playing a Mini Metro.
What else did they do that I remember fondly? Did they do a game called Grip something?
Grip Shit.
Yeah, Grip Shift. A driving game. It's not on this list of their games, but I used to love that.
Oreo Twist Lick Dunk.
That's the one I liked. Grip Shift. There you go.
Oh, well done. Well remembered.
Shift, yeah, by City. I remembered. So that's a great game.
Well done. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a weird puzzle platform racing game. It's a lot of fun.
Right, let's wrap this episode up.
Yeah.
So there we go. Poland, other games. Next month we're going to New Zealand. We're really racking up the air miles then, aren't we?
Here we go.
The big bucks. If you've enjoyed this episode, get involved. Find us on Discord. Go to our website, o3c.games, click the Discord link, come and chat with us. Find us on social media at O3C Games. Follow us, subscribe, retweet, tweet, X, Bing Bong, who knows, TikTok. Do all those things.
Yeah.
And come back here, same time next month. 1st of April, we'll be in New Zealand. Oh, it's going to be good.
Do you know what else is on the list? Madagascar.